Hey, I've been reading a lot about ancient education systems, and I came across something really fascinating about Vedic education. Have you heard about it?
Oh, absolutely. Vedic education, or Vedic education, is a foundational aspect of ancient Indian education. It's so different from the way we think about schooling today. What did you find interesting about it?
Well, I learned that primary education during the Vedic period was initially arranged within families. But when it came to higher education, it was organized in places called gurukuls. It's quite intriguing that the system was so family-centric in its early stages.
Yes, that's right. In those times, education began at home. The initial learning process was quite informal and heavily based on the family's traditions and values. Once a child was ready for higher education, typically after the Upanayana or initiation ceremony, they would leave their family home and move into a gurukul.
The Upanayana ceremony sounds like a big deal. It seems like it marked a significant transition for a child. Can you tell me more about that?
The Upanayana ceremony was indeed a pivotal moment. It wasn't just about starting formal education. It was a rite of passage that marked the student's transition into a spiritual and educational journey. During this ceremony, the pupil would leave the home of their natural parents and move to live with their preceptor, or guru, in a gurukul. This was where they would receive their education.
I see. So, it was a kind of boarding school, but with a much deeper meaning and purpose. What was the main aim of this Vedic education?
Exactly. The aim of Vedic education was far more comprehensive than just imparting knowledge. It focused on the complete realization of the self and achieving freedom of the soul, which is referred to as mukti or moksha. The education system was designed to prepare individuals for different ways of living according to their caste and societal roles. It wasn't just intellectual. It also had strong moral, spiritual, and religious components.
That's fascinating. It seems like the education was holistic, covering various aspects of life, not just academics. What exactly was taught in these gurukuls?
In gurukuls, the education wasn't just about academic learning. Students learned moral values, life skills, and physical discipline. The educational objectives were broad. They aimed at developing the physical, moral, and intellectual powers of the students. There was a strong emphasis on attention, concentration, and practices like yoga to achieve a well-rounded development. Also, education was free of cost, and students lived a life of discipline and simplicity.
It sounds like a very immersive way of learning. The students must have built strong relationships with their mentors.
Yes, indeed. The Gurukul system was based on a close relationship between the teacher and the student. Students lived with their mentors and were under their direct guidance, which allowed for a deep bond to form. This system helped in not just imparting knowledge, but also in transmitting cultural and moral values from one generation to another.
That's such a contrast to modern education systems, where the focus is often more on just intellectual achievement. I also read about some statements related to education during the Vedic period. Could we discuss them?
Sure, let's go over them. I'm sure it will help us understand the nuances of Vedic education better.
Great! The first statement says, the Upanayana ceremony, which marked the initiation of a child into the study of the Vedas, was performed for boys as well as for girls. And the second statement says, both boys and girls received education in ashrams and gurukulas in ancient India. Which do you think is correct?
Okay, so for statement I, it's a bit tricky. The Upanayana ceremony was indeed traditionally performed for boys, primarily from the Brahmin, Kshatriya, and Vaishya castes. There are references to girls receiving education, but this was not a common practice for most of them. As for statement 2, it is not entirely accurate. While there were instances of girls receiving education, it wasn't widespread or systematic like for boys. So, I'd say both statements are false.
That makes sense. So, the correct option would be 2. Both statement I and statement 2 are false.
Exactly. What's the next statement?
The next pair of statements is statement I. It is said that in the early Vedic period, women had equal rights to get any type of education. Statement 2. In the last phase of the Vedic period, as there were no separate gurukuls for girls of the age 12 years and above, they could not receive higher education.
Ah, this one's interesting. Statement I is actually true. In the early Vedic period, women had more freedom and access to education, and there are records of women scholars like Gargi and Maitri. However, Statement 2 is also true. In the later Vedic period, societal changes led to fewer opportunities for women in education, especially in higher education. So, the correct answer here is 1. Both Statement I and Statement 2 are true.
Got it. It's fascinating how the roles and rights of women evolved over time. Now, what about the statement, during the Vedic period, the higher level of education had? Followed by options like professional, general, specialized, and technical curriculums?
In the Vedic period, higher education was mostly specialized. It focused on deep knowledge of specific subjects like the Vedas, Upanishads, astronomy, and more. So, the right answer would be 3. Specialized curriculum.
That's quite detailed. Lastly, there's a statement pair saying, Statement I, in ancient India only an informal system of education was in existence. Statement 2, in ancient India, indigenous education was imparted at home, in temples, pathshalas, and gurukulas.
This is another interesting one. Statement I is incorrect. While the initial education was informal, the Gurukul system was quite structured and formal. On the other hand, Statement 2 is correct because education was indeed imparted in various places like homes, temples, pathshalas, and gurukuls. So, the answer here is 4. Statement I is incorrect but Statement 2 is correct.
Hey, I've been reading up on ancient Indian education systems again, and now I'm curious about Buddhist education. I came across terms like Mahavihara and names of ancient universities like Taxila and Nalanda. Do you know much about them?
Oh, definitely. Buddhist education is another fascinating topic. The term Mahavihara is a great starting point. It's a Sanskrit and Pali term that means a great vihara, which essentially refers to a large monastic complex. These were centers of learning and played a pivotal role in the spread of Buddhist teachings and education.
So, these were like Buddhist monasteries that also served as educational institutions, right? How were they different from regular monasteries?
Yes, exactly. Mahaviharas were much more than just monasteries. While they did serve as living quarters for monks, they were also extensive centers of learning where various subjects were taught, not just religious teachings. They were like ancient universities, where students could learn philosophy, logic, medicine, and other sciences. One of the most famous examples is the Nalanda University in the ancient kingdom of Magadha, which is modern-day Bihar in India.
Nalanda University. I read that it was quite famous and played a crucial role in India's status as a powerful learning hub around the 4th century. Can you tell me more about it?
Sure. Nalanda was one of the most renowned Mahaviharas of its time. It gained significant fame for its rigorous admission process and high standards of education. The entrance exams were quite challenging and were conducted by a group of learned pundits known as Dwaracharyas. They were responsible for ensuring only the most qualified students gained admission. These exams were overseen by various gatekeepers and a separate board of teachers specifically assigned to manage the admissions. Nalanda was truly a beacon of knowledge in ancient India, and it continued to flourish until it was included in the tentative list of World Heritage in 2009 due to its historical importance.
Wow, the entrance process sounds intense. It's amazing how organized and formal the education system was back then. What about other universities like Taxila and Vikramashala? Were they similar?
Taxila and Vikramashala were also significant centers of learning, each with its unique attributes. Taxila University, founded in the 6th century BC, is actually older than Nalanda. Located in what is now Rawalpindi district in Punjab, Pakistan, it attracted over 10,500 students from various parts of the world, including Babylonia, Greece, Arabia, and China. It offered a diverse range of 64 different fields of study, such as Vedas, grammar, philosophy, Ayurveda, agriculture, surgery, politics, archery, astronomy, commerce, and even music and dance. Admission was purely based on merit, and it was one of the first instances of a merit-based educational system. It's an important archaeological site today and was declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1980.
That's impressive. Taxila seems to have been a melting pot of cultures and knowledge. And Vikramashila, how did it contribute to Buddhist education?
Vikramashila, along with Nalanda, was one of the two most important centers of learning in India during the Pala Empire. It was located in what is now the Bhagalpur district in Bihar. Vikramashila specialized in subjects like philosophy, grammar, metaphysics, and Indian logic. It was established as a response to a perceived decline in the quality of scholarship at Nalanda and aimed to revive the high standards of Buddhist education.
So, Vikramashila was sort of a competitor or a complementary institution to Nalanda, keeping the academic standards high. Were there other important centers of learning like these?
Yes, there were several other notable centers of learning, such as Mithila University, Yagadala University, and Adantapura University. Mithila University, although less mentioned in records, was known for its Brahmanical education system and is believed to have existed since the time of Raja Yanak. Yagadala University, located in what is now Bangladesh, was an important center of learning in the early 11th century. Adantapura University, established in the late 8th century in Magadha, flourished for about 400 years until the 12th century. Each of these centers contributed to the rich tapestry of ancient Indian education, focusing on various disciplines and spreading knowledge far and wide.
That's really fascinating. Moving on to another topic, I was also reading about the British education system in India. It seems like the British made some significant changes to the educational landscape. What do you know about this?
The British indeed transformed the education system in India significantly. One of the key figures in this transformation was Thomas Babington Macaulay. On February 2, 1835, he presented his famous Minute on Indian Education. In this document, Macaulay argued for the superiority of English education over traditional Indian knowledge systems and pushed for English to be the medium of instruction. This led to the implementation of the English Education Act of 1835.
I've heard about Macaulay's Minute. It seems like it had a huge impact on the way education was perceived in India. How did the English Education Act of 1835 change things?
The English Education Act of 1835 was a legislative act of the Council of India, which was crucial in reallocating funds that were previously required by the British Parliament to be spent on education and literature in India. With this act, the focus shifted entirely towards promoting English education. The aim was to create a class of English-speaking Indians who could serve as intermediaries between the British rulers and the Indian population. It marked the beginning of a more formalized, Western-style education system in India, which was quite different from the indigenous systems of education that existed before.
That sounds like a significant shift. Was there any effort to balance this new system with the existing traditional education?
There was some recognition of the need to blend traditional and modern educational practices. This is evident in Wood's Dispatch of 1854, which was a detailed directive sent by Sir Charles Wood to Lord Dalhousie, the then Governor-General of India. Wood's Dispatch is often considered the Magna Carta of English education in India because it laid down the framework for the establishment of a comprehensive education system in India. It suggested that primary schools adopt vernacular languages, high schools use an Anglo-vernacular medium, and English be the medium for college-level education. It also recognized the need for government support for female education and proposed measures to expand it.
It's interesting to see that there was at least some acknowledgement of the importance of vernacular languages in female education. What was the outcome of Wood's Dispatch?
The most notable outcome of Wood's Dispatch was the establishment of the Universities of Calcutta, Bombay, and Madras in 1857, modeled after the University of London. These were the first modern universities established in India and marked a significant step in the expansion of higher education. Later, universities were also established in Punjab, Lahore, and Allahabad to meet the increasing demand for higher education in those regions.
That's quite a legacy. Did the British take any other steps to evaluate and improve the education system?
Yes, The British government took further steps, notably with the Hunter Commission of 1882, also known as the Indian Education Commission. Named after its chairman, Lord William Hunter, the commission aimed to evaluate the effectiveness of Wood's dispatch and to address complaints about its implementation. The Hunter Commission was a landmark because it highlighted the gaps and deficiencies in the education system and made recommendations for improvements, especially in primary and secondary education.
So, the Hunter Commission was a way to refine and better implement the policies laid out by Wood's dispatch.
Exactly. It sought to improve access to education and ensure that the policies introduced by Wood's dispatch were effectively carried out. The Commission's recommendations led to better oversight and funding for primary and secondary schools, which ultimately helped in expanding educational opportunities for Indians.
That's quite a comprehensive overview. It's amazing to see how education evolved over time in India, from the ancient Buddhist and Brahmanical systems to the British reforms. Each era brought its own set of philosophies, practices, and challenges.
Absolutely. The history of education in India is incredibly rich and diverse. Understanding these different phases helps us appreciate the complexities and the value of preserving educational heritage while adapting to modern needs.
Thanks for explaining all this. I feel like I've learned so much today about both Buddhist and British education systems.
I've been diving into how education policy is shaped in India, and I came across a lot of different bodies and councils. It's quite a complex system. Could you help me make sense of it all?
Of course. The education policy landscape in India is indeed vast and involves multiple bodies, each with its specific role. Let's start with the Ministry of Education. It's the central government body responsible for the implementation of the national policy on education. It was known as the Ministry of Human Resource Development from 1985 to 2020 before being renamed to better reflect its focus on education.
So, the Ministry of Education is at the top of the hierarchy in terms of education policy?
Yes, that's right. The ministry oversees everything, but there are also several other important bodies involved in shaping and regulating education. For example, the Central Advisory Board of Education, or CABE, is the apex advisory body. It advises both the central and state governments on education. It was first established in 1920, dissolved, and then re-established in 1935. It's actually the oldest and highest advisory board in the education sector in India.
Interesting. And what about the Inter-University Board and the Association of Indian Universities?
The Inter-University Board was established in 1925 to promote cooperation among universities by sharing information and collaborating in fields like education, culture, and sports. It was later renamed the Association of Indian Universities, IU. The IU plays a key role in evaluating courses, syllabi, standards, and credits of foreign universities to equate them with Indian university standards.
So, the IU ensures that foreign degrees are comparable to Indian degrees?
Exactly. It helps maintain a standard and ensures that students with foreign education can integrate seamlessly into the Indian educational framework. Then we have the University Grants Commission, UC, which is a statutory body set up by the Department of Higher Education. It was established in 1956 based on the recommendations of the Radhakrishnan Commission.
I've heard about the UC. Isn't it the main regulatory body for universities in India?
Yes, the UC is crucial. Its mandate includes promoting and coordinating university education, maintaining standards of teaching, examinations, and research in universities, and framing regulations on minimum standards of education. It also monitors developments in the field of collegiate and university education, disburses grants, and serves as a vital link between the union and state governments and institutions of higher learning.
That sounds like a comprehensive role. Are there other regulatory bodies apart from the UC?
Yes, several other regulatory bodies oversee specific fields of education. For example, the All India Council for Technical Education (ICT) regulates technical education programs, including engineering, technology, architecture, management, pharmacy, and more. Then there's the Medical Council of India (MCI) for medical education, the Pharmacy Council of India (PCI) for pharmacy education, the Bar Council of India (PSI) for legal education, the National Council of Educational Research and Training (NCERT) for school education, and the National Council for Teacher Education (NCTE) for teacher training.
Wow, that's a lot of different councils. What about bodies that focus on assessing and accrediting educational institutions?
Good question. For accreditation, we have the National Assessment and Accreditation Council (NAC), which assesses and accredits higher educational institutions like colleges and universities to determine their quality status. Similarly, the National Board of Accreditation (NBA) was established in 1994 under the ICT Act to assess the quality of programs offered by technical institutions at various levels.
This is so detailed. And what about the types of universities in India? I've heard terms like central, state, and private universities, but I'm not sure what differentiates them.
Sure, let's break it down. Central universities are established by an act of parliament and are under the direct purview of the Department of Higher Education, Ministry of Education. The President of India is the visitor for these universities. Some prominent central universities include the University of Delhi, Aligarh Muslim University, Jawaharlal Nehru University, and Indira Gandhi National Open University, ANU, among others.
So, central universities are directly managed by the central government. What about state universities?
State universities are run by the state governments and are usually established by Local Legislative Assembly Act. While they receive guidance and some funding from the UC, they primarily operate under the regulations set by their respective state governments.
Got it. And how do private universities fit into this picture?
Private universities are not owned by the state and are operated by private entities. Their funding mainly comes from tuition fees, private investments, and donations. While they have more autonomy than state or central universities, they still need to adhere to certain standards set by the UC or other regulatory bodies, especially if they want their degrees to be recognized.
That makes sense. I also read about something called deemed universities. What exactly are they?
Deemed universities are institutions of higher education, other than universities, that work at a very high standard in a specific area of study. The status of deemed to be university is granted by the central government on the advice of the UC. The first institute to be granted deemed university status was the Indian Institute of Science on May 12, 1958.
That's interesting. And what about open universities? Are they different from the other types?
Yes, open universities have an open-door policy with minimal or no entry requirements, making education more accessible to a larger population. They often use distance learning methods. The first state open university in India was the Bhim Rao Ambedkar Open University, established in 1982 in Hyderabad. The Indira Gandhi National Open University, ANU, established in 1985, is the most well-known open university in India and serves millions of students through its distance education programs.
That's a lot to take in, but it's all very insightful. Thanks for explaining all these different policy-making bodies and types of universities in India. It's amazing how diverse and structured the education system is.
I came across an interesting diagram about the regulatory framework of higher education in India. It looks like a triangular structure with sections labeled policy making, regulation, and accreditation. Could you help me understand what each of these sections involves?
Of course. The regulatory framework for higher education in India is indeed structured in a way that covers all aspects of managing and maintaining educational standards. The triangle you mentioned breaks down the responsibilities among different bodies to ensure that education in India is well governed and standardized. Let's start with the policy-making section.
Sure, let's start there. What does the policy-making section include?
The policy-making section includes bodies that are responsible for formulating educational policies at both the national and state levels. The key player here is the Department of Higher Education, which is part of the Ministry of Education. This department was formerly known as the Ministry of Human Resource Development until 2020. It's responsible for implementing the national policy on education and ensuring that the educational policies align with the country's broader goals and needs.
So, the Department of Higher Education is at the top level of policy making for education in India. What other bodies are involved in this process?
Alongside the Department of Higher Education, we have the Association of Indian Universities, AU. The IU acts as a coordinating body for Indian universities and helps in sharing information, fostering cooperation, and maintaining standards across universities. Then there's the Central Advisory Board of Education, CABE, which is the highest advisory body on education in India. It advises both central and state governments on policy matters and ensures that educational reforms and strategies are effectively implemented.
CABE seems quite important if it's advising both levels of government. What about the state level? Are there any specific bodies that work at the state level for policy making?
Yes, each state has its own state councils for higher education. These councils assist in formulating and implementing educational policies tailored to the needs of their respective states. They work in coordination with the central government to ensure that educational policies are consistent across the country, while also addressing local requirements.
That makes sense. It's good to have both the national and state perspective on education. Moving on to the regulation section, what does it involve?
The regulation section is all about maintaining standards and ensuring compliance with educational policies. The University Grants Commission (UG) is the key regulatory body here. Established under the UG Act of 1956, the UG is responsible for coordinating and determining standards of university education. It also disburses funds to universities and colleges and acts as a link between the union and state governments and higher education institutions.
I've definitely heard of the UG. It seems like a pretty powerful body in terms of higher education. What other regulatory bodies are there?
There are quite a few other regulatory bodies that oversee specific areas of education. For instance, the All India Council for Technical Education (ICT) regulates technical education, including engineering, technology, architecture, and management programs. Then there's the Medical Council of India (MCI), which regulates medical education, the Pharmacy Council of India (PCI) for pharmacy education, the Bar Council of India (C) for legal education, and the National Council for Teacher Education (NCT) for teacher education.
So, each field has its own dedicated regulatory body. That's quite thorough. Are there any bodies for research or specialized fields?
Absolutely. There are several councils dedicated to research and specialized fields. For example, the Indian Council of Agricultural Research (ICAR) oversees agricultural education and research. The Indian Council of Medical Research (ICMR) focuses on medical research. The Indian Council of Social Science Research (ICSR) deals with social sciences, and the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research (CSIR) is involved in various scientific research fields.
That's a comprehensive list of regulatory bodies. It really shows how each area of education and research is closely monitored and regulated. What about the accreditation section? How does that fit into the picture?
The accreditation section focuses on assessing and ensuring the quality of education provided by institutions. The National Board of Accreditation (NBA) and the National Assessment and Accreditation Council (NAC) are the two main accrediting bodies in India.
What exactly do the NBA and NAC do?
The National Board of Accreditation (NBA) was established in 1994 under the ICT Act to assess the quality of programs offered by technical institutions. It accredits programs from diploma to postgraduate levels in fields like engineering, technology, management, pharmacy, and architecture. The goal is to ensure that these programs meet high standards of quality.
On the other hand, the National Assessment and Accreditation Council (NAC) assesses and accredits entire institutions, such as colleges and universities, to determine their overall quality status. NAC looks at various parameters, including teaching and learning, research, infrastructure, and governance, to provide an overall rating for the institution.
That's interesting. So, NAC focuses on the overall quality of institutions, while NBA looks at specific programs. It seems like India has a very detailed and structured approach to regulating higher education.
Exactly. The framework is designed to ensure that both the quality of education and the standards of institutions are maintained across the country. It's a comprehensive system that covers every aspect of higher education, from policymaking to regulation and accreditation.
I've been reading up on the history of education in India, especially after independence. I came across the Radhakrishnan Commission and the Madhya Commission. Can you tell me more about them?
Sure. These commissions were pivotal in shaping India's education system post-independence. Let's start with the Radhakrishnan Commission, also known as the University Education Commission of 1948-49. This was the first education commission set up after India gained independence. It was chaired by Dr. Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan, who later became the second president of India.
I've heard of Dr. Radhakrishnan. He was a renowned philosopher and statesman. What were the main objectives of this commission?
The Radhakrishnan Commission was primarily set up to address the issues faced by colleges and universities in India at that time. The commission aimed to reform university education to better serve the needs of independent India. One of its key recommendations was the integration of secondary education and higher education, which led to the establishment of the University Grants Commission (UG). This was a significant step in creating a structured and coordinated higher education system in India.
That makes sense. By creating the UG, they were able to standardize higher education across the country. What about the Madaliyar Commission? I read that it focused on secondary education.
Exactly. The Madaliyar Commission, officially known as the Secondary Education Commission of 1952-53, was set up under the chairmanship of Dr. Lakshmanasmi Madaliyar. Its main focus was on improving secondary education. The commission made several important recommendations, such as diversifying the curriculum, introducing an intermediate level between secondary and university education, and creating a three-tier system for undergraduate courses.
It sounds like the Madaliyar Commission was all about making education more comprehensive and adaptable to different needs.
Yes, that's right. The commission aimed to develop a more rounded education system that could produce well-rounded citizens. It emphasized the development of democratic citizenship, vocational skills, and personal growth. These recommendations were crucial for a young nation like India that needed skilled individuals in various fields.
I can see how both commissions played important roles in shaping India's education system. Moving on to more recent times, I've also been reading about the National Education Policy, NEP, 2020. It seems like a big deal. Can you explain what it's all about?